Have you ever wondered how we think, how we move, how we create, how to produce a thought that becomes a movement, that becomes a story, that becomes a performance? When we dance, we create movements, stories, performances, and bring these things to life with energy, emotion, and artistry. But where does the ability to create a thought, to produce a movement, to tell a story, come from? The brain is the center of thought, the center of process, the center of creativity. Without the brain, we as creators would not be able to think of evoking concepts, develop movement, let alone move at all. The brain is the center of thought. Whether you know it or not, you are always thinking. The brain is always working to sort, to store, to find information within the mind. When we dance, our thinking goes beyond what we want to move. We think about our technique, alignment, performance quality, emotion, precision, and timing. All of our thoughts are developed in the frontal lobe, where we have to decide. We decide to think about technique, alignment, performance quality, emotion, precision, and timing. Our thoughts travel around our brain through neurons that send signals to various parts of our bodies and brain. Like all of us, neurons have potential to fire and succeed. Positive potential, negative potential. Full of potential, neurons fire, traveling through an open space called a synapse. Between each neuron, there's a synapse that helps transport signals to the receiving part of the neuron. From neuron to neuron, the signal travels through a chain, forming a community of neurons who communicate between each other, each signal with its own unique path. Our thoughts are then transmitted through neurons to different parts of our body. We think of doing a tendu. The thought builds up potential within a neuron, fires, and travels through our body, creating a tendu. The brain is the center of movement. When we want to move, our brain sends a signal to that part of our body that we want to move. We have to think before we move in order to control the movement. The cerebellum is where our ability to control motor skills lies, in the back of the brain, under the occipital lobe. About the size of a human's fist, it makes up 1/10 of the brain, and is made up of 50% of neurons. The cerebellum holds the ability to receive signals from the frontal lobe, sending those signals through the cortex and onto muscle nerves within the body. The cerebellum also controls balance. Without this, we would never be able to do a passe, let alone stand on 2 feet without falling over. It controls our ability to hold ourselves within alignment, within a balance, and to maintain coordination. When we think of doing a tendu, the thought builds up potential within a neuron, fires, and travels to our cerebellum and onto our legs to create a tendu. The more difficult the combination, phrase, sequence, the more neurons fire within the cerebellum to produce a movement. The cerebellum also holds memory of our motor skills that helps us move and dance. The hippocampus is where our memory is stored. It converts what's in our minds into short-term memory, into long-term memory. When we learn a phrase, we are putting that information into our short-term memory. That is why we can learn a phrase and perform it after a short period of time. To do a phrase you learned a week ago, you use your hippocampus to remember that phrase, pulling from the long-term memory. The amygdala is responsible for our emotion. When we perform, we use certain emotions to evoke characters, concepts, stories. We pull from our hippocampus memories of certain emotions that the amygdala brought to us in order to perform with emotional expression. Our brain helps with change. It helps to adapt to the space. It collects information, processes information, acts on information. The nervous system within the body contains neurons that communicate with one another. Communication between the outside environments communicates between the body and the brain, is translated in the brain almost instantly. When we dance, we are changing our environment by every movement we make, with different relationships to the floor and space. Our nervous system is allowing us to adapt to this ever-changing change within the space. As we dance, we use the frontal lobe for decision and thinking, the cerebellum for movement, the hippocampus for memory, the amygdala for emotion, the nervous system for change. The brain aids our abilities to dance. But what does dance do for the brain? Dance increases our ability to grow in cognitive thinking, memory capacity, and perception. Dance helps stimulate the attention systems by rolling, jumping, spinning, tumbling, giving our brain oxygen while increasing the amount of blood flow. Blood flow increases the chance for more neurons to develop and connect to transfer data, activity, and plasticity, improving the ability for neurons to communicate faster, more frequently, resulting in better cognition, memory, and learning skills. The more we dance, the more we can improve our brain in its skill, providing a never-ending loop, sending neurons back and forth from our brains to our bodies, creating movement, stories, and performances. So how do we think? How do we move? How do we create movements, stories, performances?